Hey, it's really good to see you. Did you ever think you'd actually see this video coming to you? Me either. I apologize. It's been a rough week for me. This not sleeping thing is kicking my booty, and I'm going to power through it and make sure this doesn't happen again next time. Everything will be on time from now on, barring anything the Lord has planned for me. So, just to touch on a couple of things before we get started. I sent you an email that has a PDF attachment for a study guide for Module 11. I want you guys to study for the test on that study guide and not the one that's in your workbook. This unit is filled with a lot of technical stuff for the muscles, and I don't want you to get bogged down with that. It's important stuff, but it's not necessary for you to memorize it or internalize it. So just read through it and glean what you can. And the study guide is made from the test itself. So I've only written down information for you to look up that pertains to the exact questions on the test. I've also supplied the page in the textbook that you can find that information, make it as easy as possible, okay? I've also sent you a couple of PDF attachments for some photos that I'm going to be showing you while I'm talking to you, but they can be seen a little better if you want to download them to your phone or your computer and get a better look. Also, a link to a short video to watch about how muscles work, and it's only about, I don't know, maybe 4 to 6 minutes long. So I guess that's it for right now. So we'll get started with our class. Oh, and by the way, I think it'd be great if we could try to do these on Zoom the next couple of times, and we could actually have some interaction with each other because I miss talking to you guys. So I also wanted to say before I forget, on Module 12, there is no test. So you'll get a reprieve from that for at least another week after this, okay? So we're going to start taking a look at muscles. We finished up with the bones and ligaments and tendons and all that good stuff last time. So muscles actually are made up of 3 different types of muscles. First, you have your cardiac, which is pretty self-explanatory. That is the muscle that's made up, your heart is made up of, and that's the only place you find cardiac muscle. You also have smooth muscle, which is the muscle that controls all your automatic functions, like your breathing and your heartbeat, your blinking, things like that. Then you have skeletal muscle, or as they say in England, skeletal. And that type of muscle is controlled by you. When you decide you want something to happen, you actually move your arm, your neck, your foot, whatever it is, and you make that happen. There are some types of skeletal muscle that are sort of automatic. So, for instance, the peristaltic action, which is when you swallow, everything goes down the esophagus and gets squeezed down into the stomach. That is semi-automatic. You also have your diaphragm responds to the carbon dioxide in your body and through what your brain is telling it, and so that's semi-automatic as well. Posture and muscle tone and balance are all constantly being corrected by your brain in the background without you even knowing. So let's talk about muscle contraction. How do those muscles work? Now, if you've watched the video already, you've seen a little bit about that, and we're just going to keep it really simple. There's a lot going on when your muscles are contracting and returning to their normal length. And so we're not going to ask you to break down all of those minute chemical things that are going on. We just want you to understand the basics of how everything is set up. So you have cells in your body called muscle fibers. And if you saw in the video that I had you watch, you can see that in the muscle fiber, there are lots of things contained within the muscle fiber itself. And it breaks down into things called myofibril, and then sarcomeres, and then thin and thick filaments. And those are all working together through chemical processes to make your muscles move. And so if you want to move muscles to lift heavier things, then you're going to need more muscle fibers engaging in order to do that. Smaller muscles will have lesser amounts of muscle fiber. Surrounding all of that muscle fiber is connective tissue called the fascia. And the fascia is getting a lot of attention these days for people have really super tight connective tissue, and they're looking at how to relax that and how to treat it through massage and various other types of things to help people with muscle pain that otherwise aren't being addressed by traditional methods. One thing that you may or may not have experienced that is connected to the fascia is called plantar fasciitis, and that is connective tissue that goes from your heel all the way up to the ball of your foot. And it can be very, very tight. It can actually cause your foot to cramp a little bit. And it's the shortening of the connective tissue going on in there. If you were to exercise it, help strengthen that and stretch it, it actually goes away after a while, but it can be really, really uncomfortable. It's usually caused by wearing ill-fitting shoes, as well as shoes that don't support your foot very well, as well as not stretching it properly. One really easy way, and I used to have a problem with this years ago, to stretch it is to roll your foot over the top of a golf ball. You can even use a tennis ball, but a golf ball, because it's a lot smaller, really gets into that arch of your foot and helps to stretch that out. You can just do that while you're sitting down watching TV or looking at something on your phone or reading, and just mindlessly rub your foot back and forth over the top of that. If you do that several times a day, that actually helps to stretch that out and loosens that up. And if you get better shoes, which I didn't used to have, so I pay more attention to that now. I really liked flip-flops a lot when I got warm very easily. And so I wouldn't wear shoes that were very supportive. So once I quit doing that and I started doing the stretching exercises, it took care of itself. It's a really common thing that a lot of people experience. Shin splints is another fascia problem that people experience. So you've got protective tissue over your shin muscle, the fascia in there. And so when you run on hard surfaces, concrete, especially if you're jogging on concrete or paved roads, it really can cause your shins to take a beating. So what happens is, because there's very thin skin over that bone right there, and there's not a lot of fat there, you actually experience swelling inwardly in that area instead of outwardly when that connective tissue gets traumatized. And so you can cause a lot of pain. Again, lots of stretching is really good for it. Running on surfaces that have better shock absorption work much better too. So stay away from the concrete and the pavement if you can, if you're a jogger or a runner or a sprinter of any kind. So then, let's see. Let's talk about gross motor control and fine motor control. Gross motor control is when you use your larger muscles in your body, like your leg muscles, your quads up there in your thigh, your calves. When you're using all of your abs, those are larger muscles that require more muscle fibers to be working. And the fine motor skills are things like your fingers pinching, writing, drawing, cutting with scissors, all playing the piano. All those types of things are going to be fine motor skills because they are much smaller movements and they require much less muscles. Okay, so let's talk about how muscles get their names. You probably are familiar with a lot of different muscle names. You may or may not know where they're actually located, but a lot of them, remember, medical terms come from Latin and Greek. So if you hear certain word parts, then you can have a pretty good guess at which area they're connected to. So for example, we have the pectoralis muscle. Sometimes they're called the pecs. They're your chest muscles up here at the top. And the reason they're called pectoralis is because chest is the word pectus in Latin. Okay, so those are your pecs or your pectoralis muscles. Rectus means straight, so you have straight chest muscles. Then we also have something called the abdominis rectus, which is that six-pack area that people are familiar with, or the lack thereof, I should say. So it's a line, it's a straight, remember rectus means straight, abdominis means abdomen, your midsection. So it's a line of muscles running up and down on either side of your abdomen area. And it might, a muscle might also be labeled by its shape. So you have the deltoid muscle, which is that muscle right here in your arm, which I have a lot of trouble with because I have frozen shoulder in my joint and it affects this muscle, but it's shaped like a D. And delta is the name for D in Greek. And so the muscle is called the deltoid muscle because it's shaped a bit like a D. The trapezius muscle, which means table, is the flat back muscle up here that can carry a lot of weight, carries burdens. That's where a lot of people carry all of their stress up there, is the traps and all those areas up there. Because table means trapezius. A muscle can also be named because of its size. So an example would be the latissimus dorsi, which means the broadest muscle of the back, down the mid-back area. And then you have your gluteus maximus, or your bum. You also have two other types of muscle in your rear end. One is called the gluteus medius, and the other is called the gluteus minimus. So if you know a little bit of Latin and Greek word parts, you can guess which are the bigger and the smaller muscles in the glute. So you've got gluteus maximus, maximal means the biggest, maxi. And then you've got gluteus medius, medium. So that's the middle size gluteus muscle. And then you have gluteus minimus, minimal, minimum. That's the smallest gluteus muscle. One thing I did want to talk to you about was something called diastasis recti. I know a little bit about it because unfortunately I'm dealing with it and it is not fun. But what happens when your abdominal muscles don't come together in the middle of your body like they should? So I'm going to show you an example. Okay, so here we have a normal abdomen. So you've got the rectus abdominis muscle right here on either side. And then you have the connective tissue, the lineus alba. That's the whitish stuff right in between there. See all that white area? That is the lineus albus. So this is what it looks like normally when the muscles are in the right place. When you get pregnant, this is very common for this to happen. These muscles separate because of the stress on them. And then you've got all this connective tissue holding everything in instead of the muscles here. And it can be very, very hard on the body. Some people will go back to normal after pregnancy. A lot of people will not. This is a really common thing. So this can be what happens after pregnancy. So the muscles don't come back together and you get a bulge. And a lot of time you'll get a bulge on men and women that look like this, even though they're not pregnant. Because what happens is, as this connective tissue is stretched, it becomes thinner and thinner and thinner. It's not designed to carry the load like the muscles are. So actually what happens is your inner organs start to bulge out, especially if you do arching types of movements where you arch back. That really puts pressure on that area. If you get on all fours, your hands and knees, that puts a lot of pressure on that because the gravity causes your organs to hang down, and that connective tissue sometimes is all that's keeping it in, and it can really, really cause a lot of damage. So sometimes people have to have surgery for this, but there are a lot of programs, which I'm part of one now, and I'm going to be starting very soon, that allow you to do very, very specific exercises for about 4 months, depending on how extreme your opening is, that will cause those muscles to come back together. And then you're taught how to use those muscles properly in the future to keep that from happening. You know, specific ways you should be getting up and down from the floor, or specific ways that you should be exercising that abdominal region so that you don't open up those muscles again, that you can keep them strong and healthy. It's also important whenever you're doing something to strengthen your abdomen that you're doing something to strengthen your lower back as well. They work in tandem. If you don't do that together, one has to pick up the load for the other. And I can tell you a story about that too. Unfortunately, after I had Josh, I had back problems for years. And because my core wasn't strengthened and I had this problem, my back went out at the same time my abdominal muscles weren't able to carry any weight, and I was out for about 2 weeks, and I was on heavy doses of medication for the pain, and I wasn't able to take care of Josh, and it was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. So you've got to strengthen both of them together. It's really, really important. So I wanted to show you another example. Now, this is a guy who has what we call the six-pack, but he also has the diastasis recti, and it's really not very attractive. You see that opening right there? That's a problem. It's not supposed to be that way, folks, okay? So this guy could have had this happen due to exercising improperly, or he may have been overweight at one time and never did anything to rectify the problem. And then when he started exercising to get, more ripped, this stays here. This is not a healthy thing. It can continue to get bigger and bigger if you exercise improperly or if you were to gain a lot of weight. Here's another example of a man that has this. You can see right here, this guy looks pregnant. A lot of people would call this like a beer belly or beer gut or something like that. But it can very easily in men be caused by diastasis recti. This is after he did an exercise program. So you can see there's a vast, vast difference. You can see he's not real fat or anything right here, but this stomach, it's just protruding like he's pregnant. And this can happen from, again, exercising improperly and being overweight in men. Women, same thing, but also caused by pregnancy a lot of the times. And it also does damage to the pelvic floor muscles, which is why a lot of women, after they have their babies, they are really, really weak in the muscles that control the urine flow. So a lot of times they laugh or they sneeze and they say, uh-oh, I just peed my pants, because all those muscles get super weak. By exercising those abdominal muscles for the diastasis recti, it also works the pelvic floor muscles, and all of that can be strengthened, and that problem can be taken care of as well. So just a side note of interest. Next, we're going to talk about antagonist and agonist muscles. One is the agonist, then the other is the antagonist. So one moves it forward and one pulls it back into the original position. You've got to have that going at the same time. And so God has designed it that two different muscles can't be agonists and they can't be antagonists simultaneously. Again, he knows what he's doing. So something you have to keep in mind too is when you work a muscle, you have to work its counter muscle. So if you're working your biceps and you're doing those curls and those lifts and everything to have those great guns, that seem to be desirable, you also have to pay attention to working that tricep muscle, because if you're not, you're going to be weakening it, and those muscles won't work in tandem very well, and you'll have a very, very weak tricep. So again, it's like working your core abdomen muscles and your lower back muscles. You've got to work all those things together because they work as one big package. So you've got to work the agonist and the antagonist muscles that go together. So it's important to work all muscle groups, not just the ones that people think should be really ripped and looked chiseled like your biceps and like your abs. So let's see. So muscle spasms. What causes a muscle spasm? A muscle spasm is usually caused by overworking a muscle. It can be caused by dehydration, just simply not getting enough to drink, or it can be caused by staying in one position too long. It can also, the book doesn't say this, but it can also be caused by several other things. Again, something unfortunately I've experienced. It can be caused by a deficiency in certain minerals in your body. And when I was having my heart problems, that was one of the symptoms I was having. I didn't know it was related to that, but turns out that's what it was. If you have a lack of magnesium, which is essential for your heart, regulating your heart, the heartbeat. If you have a deficiency in calcium, it can cause cramping. If you have a deficiency in potassium, it can cause cramping. If you have a deficiency in sodium, it can cause cramping, or any combination of those things together. So it's really important, of course, to make sure you're eating a well-rounded amount of food. And I just have some examples here of nutritional sources from which you can get these particular minerals. So good sources of calcium, let me just say right off the top, calcium, magnesium, potassium. You're going to be so surprised. Leafy green vegetables. They are the miracle food. They supply so many nutrients. It's just astounding. So if you don't like leafy green vegetables, you're in a world of hurt because they have so many things in them that are good for us. You could just know right off the top you should be eating tons of them before you even address anything else, because you'll be getting so much just by eating those things. But calcium in particular, obviously we know milk is a source of calcium. That goes without saying. But the green leafy vegetables are really great. And something different, though, about green leafy vegetables and calcium is that you don't really get a lot of calcium from spinach. You get other things. So good sources of calcium from green leafy vegetables are broccoli, cabbage, okra, but not spinach in this particular case. Good sources of magnesium. Okay, this is the one we'll love. Dark chocolate. So if you don't like the bitterness of dark chocolate, that may not excite you, but I like dark chocolate. You want to make sure that you get one that has 70% or more cocoa in it, because otherwise it's just going to be a whole lot of sugar in it. So the more cocoa it has in it, the better it is for you. It's actually good for your heart because it has magnesium. So nuts are great, avocados, legumes, seeds, what else? Fatty fish, bananas, and of course, leafy greens. So, good sources of potassium, bananas. We know that. And there are lots of other things that have equal to or even more potassium bananas. Surprisingly, potatoes are one of those things. So, you can have avocados, you can have tomatoes, you can have kidney beans, and dried fruit is great for potassium. You have to be careful with dried fruit, though, because it can be really, really high in sugar. So it's good for you, but you want to limit how much of that you're eating. There are lots of other choices that you can have to supply potassium without eating a ton of dried fruit. And the dental assistant in me will remind you that if you eat dried fruit, you need to brush your teeth because it's very sticky. Little bits will stay on your teeth and it will just sit there, and the sugar just drips over your teeth and it creates acid and it eats away at that dental enamel, causing cavities. So if you eat dried fruits, raisins or pineapples or mangoes or anything like that, anything that's sticky like that, at the very least, rinse your mouth out with water as best you can. Try to pick those little bits off with your finger if you can. Brushing your teeth, obviously, is the best. Potassium sources: salmon, acorn squash, milk, and again, leafy greens, even spinach, and that goes for magnesium as well for spinach. So there are lots and lots of nutritional sources that you can use to beef up those nutrients in those mineral deficiencies in your diet if you have them. You can always take supplements, but remember, if you're going to take a supplement, it's never going to be as good as the actual food, and you have to be careful about the quality that you choose because sometimes they're just chemicals, that man-made chemicals that break down your body, and your body really can't absorb them, and you just urinate them away. So they're a waste of your time and your money. Another way that you can get rid of a muscle spasm is to simply stretch. So if you have a muscle spasm in your calf, for instance, you can try flexing your foot, your toes backwards to stretch that muscle. If you were to have a cramp in your shin, you could try pointing your toe to try to stretch that muscle. So you want to go the opposite direction of whatever that cramp is. Use that antagonist muscle to do the stretching. A lot of times that will help just by stretching it. A Charlie horse, you may have heard that, is actually a spasm of the gastrocnemius muscle in the calf. That's the big muscle that's in the calf. And sometimes that specifically, when you get a spasm there, it's called a Charlie horse. I don't know why it's called a Charlie horse. I think I looked that up one time. That might be interesting to find out again. And then if you have a crick in your neck or you have a stiff neck, that is that side muscle here, and that is called the sternocleidomastoid. Big word. It's just the big muscle right here on the side. And so, again, if you've got a muscle sore on this side, sometimes stretching it this way will help. Sometimes stretching it this way will help. Whatever feels the best, whatever makes you feel like you're getting a good stretch there and relieve some of that tension is the best thing to do. You can also apply heat to those areas. Those make your muscles feel really good when you apply heat. But once you do that, you need to remember to apply ice after that. So heat opens up the blood vessels. It allows better circulation, and that's why those start to feel better. But you want to make sure that after you do heat, you do an ice pack or some kind of cold application that causes the swelling to go down. My chiropractor that I used to go to said, I don't know why people want to do the heat. I tell them to do the cold. And I say, well, because the heat feels good and the cold doesn't give relief in the same way the heat does. My chiropractor I currently go to says, I don't care if you do the heat, do it if it makes you feel good, but just make sure you follow up with a cold application of some kind. You just put a cold pack on there, frozen peas, something like that, for 10 to 15 minutes after you've done whatever kind of heat pack that you've tried. So it's okay to do heat, just follow it up with cold. So the next thing I want to mention is optimum muscle length. And this is something that it's the name of the maximum contraction that a muscle can be doing to perform it with maximum force. So when athletes train, they learn how to stretch their muscles and apply their muscles in a particular way so that they can use them to get maximum strength and maximum force out of them. And if they're practicing, they want to concentrate on form. Form is how you're doing it. How are you standing? How are you holding something? How are you using your muscle in particular? So if you think about a baseball player, when he holds his bat up, there's a very specific way to do that. If you hold it up poorly, your form is bad, then you're not going to get maximum power out of that hit of the ball. If you're doing it properly and you're holding your arms in the right place and you're swinging through the right way, then you're going to get maximum force when you hit that ball. Same thing for even piano playing. You're taught to curve your hands when you play the piano instead of putting your fingers out straight, because you get maximum force with less effort when you curl your fingers as opposed to sticking them straight out. So even if you don't play the piano, you can kind of do this. Just stick your hands out on the table in front of you and put your hands out straight and pretend like you're pressing piano keys. And so you're not getting a lot of pressure down on that. Now curve your fingers a little bit to put your fingertips down on there and pretend like you're playing, and you can see the difference. You can feel the difference immediately. So that's optimum muscle length, is how to get the maximum force out of that particular muscle by practicing good form. And you can probably think of lots of things that require good form. So when you build muscle, what's happening? As you're doing an exercise, you're actually causing microscopic tears in the muscle fibers. And as these heal, they actually strengthen the muscle. That's why you hear it said that when you do strength training, that you should only do it every other day, because the muscles need 24 hours to recover and to become stronger before you go out and do this process all over again. And the more you do this, the stronger they will get. So when you exercise, you don't actually increase the number of muscle cells that you have. You just increase the diameter of each muscle cell. So you don't get more of them. They just get bigger around than before you exercised. So another reason that muscles seem to be bigger after you exercise is because you're increasing the number of blood vessels in the connective tissue that wraps around the muscle. So it makes it appear a little bit larger. And the third reason it looks bigger is because exercise reduces the amount of fat under the skin. And so when you decrease the amount of fat under the skin, then your muscles show up more defined and more chiseled, because there's less fat covering up the shape of those muscles. So that's 3 reasons why your muscles look bigger when you exercise. So what happens if you quit exercising? So unfortunately, if you quit exercising, the muscles return to, at the very least, where they were, and sometimes they end up being worse off than before you started exercising. And that's called atrophy, when they actually get smaller and they become weaker. A lot of people who are paralyzed have this problem, and so you'll see caretakers moving their legs and arms for them to try to keep some muscle tone in there. Unfortunately, when you don't have a lot of resistance to something, it's hard to build that muscle back up, but it does keep it from decreasing at a higher rate than it would if you weren't moving those muscles at all. So that's called atrophy. It happens in as you get older too, because you're not working those muscles. And so, of course, as we get older, everything stops working as well as it once did, and it starts to break down. And so if you don't keep exercising, then the muscles will atrophy. Even if you've once exercised a lot, excuse me, they will atrophy at some point when you stop. If you're not using them at all, they'll continue to atrophy as you get older. The nice thing is you can start exercising in your 80s or 90s. You can still build bone and you can still build muscle. So age is never an excuse for getting started on exercising. All right, so that's pretty much the muscle unit. And it wasn't nearly as much fun as talking to you personally so that we can have a conversation back and forth, but it was still good to be with you guys a little bit. So next week is going to look a little different because there's not a test. And before I forget, I will be getting the calendars to you. I'll send you a PDF attachment so you can download those for the next month. As far as Module 12, there's really not going to be much of a lecture. We can talk a little bit about exercising, and I have a couple of interesting videos that I'd like for you to watch. One of them is about how the mind and the body work together, and by exercising physically, what it can do for your brain. Really interesting. So yeah, I guess that's it for this week. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. I hope you have a fantastic week. If you have any questions about anything on the study guide or anything that I said in the video, of course, you can always text me, you can email me, you can call me. So take care of yourself, be safe, be well. I did want to give you a small piece of advice before I go. Don't waste your coronavirus. And by that, I mean, during all this craziness, God has given us an opportunity to do a lot of self-reflection about how we spend our time. Are we being productive? Are we doing things for the kingdom? Or are we just spinning our wheels, filling up time and not really getting anything worthwhile done? We tend to get caught up in our schedules a lot and say we don't have, quote unquote, time to do things. Well, we've been given the time. So take the opportunity that you've been given to spend some time doing some things maybe you wouldn't normally do because you can't figure out how to incorporate them into your schedule. Spend time learning something new. Spend time in the Word. And another way that we can avoid wasting this coronavirus is by witnessing to people whenever we get the opportunity. We may not be able to do that socially, face to face, but there's plenty of opportunities online to share with people through texting, through posting on social media. If you do that, just reminding people that God is in control, reminding them that God knew this was going to happen, and talking to them about why they need Jesus. Not just that they need Jesus, but why they need Jesus. Because if people don't understand why they're sick, they won't go looking for a doctor. So people have to understand how sin makes them sick, how sin keeps them separated from God. And they need to hear that that sin can be forgiven and they can come to know the Lord Jesus Christ. And so just don't waste this opportunity. God has given us a real blessing to reflect on a lot of things. And I saw a meme today on Facebook, something about, I never cleaned my house because I didn't have time. Now that I have time, turns out that wasn't the reason. So maybe we're not doing things because we convinced ourselves we didn't have time. But now that we do, maybe it's because we really just put them off and we should be doing them. So here's our opportunity to try some new things, to witness to people. One thing that God does in a crisis is it always makes an opportunity for the gospel to be spread. So let's not waste that opportunity. Let's share it wherever we can. You guys take care, be safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.